I want to thank everyone who's joining us today. This is very exciting. It's a big release for us, and I think you'll be pretty happy with what we have to show today. We've got the A team on board. So we're going to talk about 22.2. And again, I want to highlight Infragistics' goal is to create simplicity, beauty, and happiness in the world, one app at a time. So through all of our products and through our APIs and our business tools like Slingshot and Reveal, our embedded SDKs and our digital workplace, we really want you to experience great software. And with our Infragistics Ultimate release, we hope that you're building great software with our help. And that's the goal. And hopefully today you will see a little bit of that. And like I mentioned, we always have the A team for these webinars. My name is Jason. I am the Senior VP of Developer Tools. I've been at the company a very long time, and I've seen all these waves and transitions of technology. And now that we're moving into this Blazor wave, it's pretty exciting because we get to do it all again. And that's today. We're going to spend a lot of time on Blazor, and we're going to spend a lot of time on web components. So Constantine, our director of product development, is going to do a demo today of all of our new web components, which are pretty exciting. Brian, of course, is our senior product owner and expert across all the controls. And then George is our senior product owner, UX architect. And he has been with all of the app builder stuff since day one and Indigo. And he's going to do a killer demo today on some of the amazing new features that we've implemented in App Builder. So what is today all about? Today is all about grids, charts, and App Builder. You're going to see demos on a bunch of new grids that we're shipping, a bunch of new chart features that we're shipping, and then a bunch of new App Builder capabilities that we're shipping. And these are the three big areas where you spend most of your time. And it's why you come to companies like Infragistics to help accelerate your development. By us delivering the best grids on the planet with the most features and the best performance, it helps you do a better job. It makes you look good to your managers and customers, and you can deliver those beautiful experiences. And with App Builder, we just try to make it very easy for you to do that. So this is a high-level view. As with any release, we have all of the blogs, which go into a bunch of details. And then today, during the demos, you're going to see a bunch of this stuff in action, and you're going to get a little bit more detail from all of the presenters. But across our Ignite UI products, which are Angular, Blazor, Web Components, and then React. Again, we didn't spend a lot of time on React for this release. We really focused on Blazor and Web Components. React, we're going to spend a little bit more time on and release later this year. But you've got Angular 14 support. We've got Pivot Grid, persistence, filtering, query editors, all these new features for Angular that just make it easier for you to build applications. You're going to see today the new Blazor data grid. This is a new data grid. It's reimagined, it's re-engineered, and it is the same feature parity as our Angular grid. And that's the same with Web Components. So it's a brand new grid, exciting new features, exciting new code generation. We also are shipping a tree grid. In Web Components, we're shipping those two grids plus the hierarchical grid, plus the pivot grid. The hierarchical and pivot grid will come to Blazor in a few weeks. So you'll see those just pop up out of nowhere, and you'll get an email from us saying, hey, if you are waiting for the Blazor hierarchical grid, go grab it. And then, of course, new controls and dozens of updates across all of our Ignite UI products. And those are all focused on the modern web. Data visualization, we continue to do a lot of work here. I'm going to show you some samples today that kind of are a culmination of things that we've talked about in previous webinars, but we're shipping today as a release. So it's just going to get easier for you to use charts, build charts, use those charts through App Builder, do a little bit of customization and code, and then you're off to the races with beautiful visualizations. And of course, App Builder. This is our WYSIWYG tool that helps you create applications faster than you ever could by hand. So we say 8 times faster. That's the studies we've done and the surveys we've done. But we do know that only 1 in 4 development teams have a designer. So even things like setting a theme is like a pain in the neck. App Builder, it's one click and you get it. The great thing is this release, you've got all the new grids plus code generation for Blazor and new web components. So if you want to future-proof your apps, go to Web Components because it's framework agnostic. You don't need Blazor, you don't need Angular, you don't need React. It just is native to the browser. We have the leading web component product on the market. It has all the same features as our Angular and our Blazor product. And the best thing is it's got the grids. And the grids are really what's important. We're going to show you a little bit of that today as well. Constantine will do that in his demo. But with that, we want to get right to the demos. So the first thing that I want to highlight is the samples and the docs for Blazor, and it's going to be the same for web components. So I'm going to just show a couple things here. The docs you'll notice here for Blazor, if you've used Blazor or web components before, there was docs, but there wasn't a ton of controls and there wasn't a ton of features. Well, the big thing is by releasing these new grids with all the same capabilities and features that we have in Angular, we get all these benefits like styling and theming. So you get all of the palettes, typographies, styling. We get all of the layout capabilities. And you'll notice here where the big green new is, these are going to be all of your grid samples. So there are so many samples. Like, for example, if I go to multi-column headers, you're going to be able to see the multi-column header sample. You can see the C#, the razor, and everything that goes with it. So it's really easy to learn the product and sort of do things. Another neat one here is, I think row dragging was one of the ones I was looking at earlier. It might work here. Yeah, this is cool. So keep in mind, this is your Blazor grid. You can create scenarios where you allow users to reorganize the grid with drag and drop, or just drag and drop into other grids, or maybe a list box, or you want to drag from a grid into a bin and you're building some configuration or reporting. So just tons of cool new features. And then you'll see the same for tree grid. And then as I scroll down, of course, the charts have been there. There's updates across the API and the chart features. And then you see all of the other components that we're releasing. So the docs are completely new, tons of examples, as you can see, and just a lot to do. So let's go minimize this, and I will bring up my screen here. So here we have the app builder UI. I just saw an anonymous attendee. Does it support C# Maui Blazor? Yeah, that was in a webinar we did a couple months ago. Of course, we support Maui in a hybrid app with Blazor, and it is beautiful. In the webinar, I forget which one it was, but we actually showed an Android app and the desktop, the WPF desktop app with the Blazor grids and the Blazor charts. So yeah, Maui Blazor works well. And if you look at the docs, we actually have a topic that shows you how to create a .NET Maui Blazor app. So for all of you who don't know how to do that, just read the docs. Thank you, Brian, for putting this together, because it is how I used it. So the docs work. All right, so let's build a new application in App Builder. If you haven't seen App Builder before, you have the benefit of new templates that we've updated over the last few months. So now you can pick any type of UI. We combed all of the line of business apps that we had from customers and online, and these are the most common UI layouts that people use. We also have sample apps. We have a brand new sample app called the HR Dashboard, which is stunning. Andy built that on the design team, and just looks great. So that is shipping with the product, and all of the other ones will co-generate just great with Blazor and web components like they should. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to templates. I'm going to click the nav plus content template. It's a basic template that has a master view. And in the master view, we've got view 1, view 2, view 3. And this guy here, if I just run it, we've got, it'll click to the different views. So what I want to do with this is on view 1, I'm going to call this one the grid view. And I'm going to call view 2 the chart view. And we're going to create a quick Blazor app. We're going to generate the code, and then I'm going to take it into Visual Studio and continue on with that application. So in the grid view, and actually let's go to the master view here, and I want to change this guy to say grid view, like so. And you can see this is just a beautiful WYSIWYG, and let's change view 2 to chart view, like so. I'm going to delete view 3. We don't need that. That button goes away. And then you'll notice here on when I click this, the navigate to is to the grid view. So we have all the on-click actions and the routing created for you. So in the grid view, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to hit Control E, or I could go over to my toolbox and type in grid, and I can find the grid. You'll notice a new option here, tree grid. Very exciting because we had a lot of folks waiting for that tree grid. And I'm going to drag my flat grid onto the design surface. So from here, what I want to do is set a few configuration properties, but first I want to set the data source. Now I've already uploaded a data source here. I've got an autos API. So if I go over to Visual Studio, what you're going to see here is I have a web service that's running locally. This is actually a SQL Server database running a web API on top. And this is just a bunch of records. So here, if I bring up my Swagger UI, this is the data that we're going to be working with today. It's just some autos data. It's got like 20 or some fields and a few hundred rows. And this is what we're going to be querying from App Builder. And of course, it'll generate that service in the code gen. And that's what I'll be using inside of Visual Studio. So let me minimize that. So that has to be running because it's local. And I'm just going to point the API to it. So here, I'm going to say use my autos data. And it's going to go to API autos. Now, this morning, when I woke up, I forgot that I rebooted my computer last night and nothing was running. My web API was not running. So I ran this. And the beautiful thing of the Swagger definition to App Builder, we've got the schema. So my web API was not running this morning. It couldn't find localhost. So we just generated fake data. So we have the schema and we generate fake data. So you can actually be disconnected from your data source and we generate that fake data for you. So you're always working with something. You get a little warning. It says, hey, the data is not available. We're generating some fake data. So you always have data available. Now from here, you'll see that I've got the grid selected. And as usual, we've got some features. So I'm going to X out these features here just so you can see from scratch what the dialog looks like. But I've got my grid, I've got my data binding. It's really important that you have your primary key set. I have a couple fields here. I actually added this identity column like after the fact. I was trying to do something and kind of failed. The ID is actually my primary key. It's a string, but it's a unique string. So I want to go to features and you can see all the features that we have. Webinars of past, when we showed this for Angular, you always had the Angular code generation would do all these features. Now, the Blazor and the web components do all the features, which is really cool. So I'm going to say I want advanced filtering. Basically, I'm going to do everything. I'm not going to do paging because I don't have that many records. I have a few hundred or 200. I don't need paging for that. Maybe I need paging if I have 50,000 records. But I want to do grouping, hiding, moving, pinning, resizing, sorting, summaries. So you'll notice as I'm clicking all of these options, the canvas is updating. So the grid is updating with everything that I'm doing. Now, if I hit the play button, I've got my real-time preview, Blazor server. Let's go back to Blazor WASM. All right, so the Blazor server code is being shown here. But the nice thing here is that it's generated all the column definitions, all the toolbar stuff, and then the service call to where I need to get my data from. So all this is built for you. And this was always the beauty of App Builder from day one, even from Angular, is that if you have a lot of columns in your data, you have to hand code all this. There's no way around it. There's no WYSIWYG for the web. In Windows Forms, WPF, et cetera, it was really easy. All this stuff would get generated for you. So with the web, no, I mean, you don't have that. So you actually have to code all this yourself. So we've got all this good stuff here and it looks great. And then if I go over to my chart view, you'll see that nothing is here yet because we didn't actually add anything to it. So we're not going to see anything yet, but I'm going to go ahead and change that right now. So we're going to leave that there. I'm going to go back to my page explorer. I'm going to click chart. And here I want to pick a slightly different layout. So I'm going to do like a top bottom layout and I'm just going to show two charts. So what I'm going to do is a Control E and I'm going to select a category chart and I'm going to right click on this and do a copy and I'm going to do a paste. So I just got two category charts and the data is going to be the same autos data. So let's go to data, autos, API autos, and data, autos, API autos. Now, everyone looking at this is like, that's completely useless. And you're absolutely right. I'm going to show you the new capabilities in the category chart, which is going to clean this up with a couple settings on the category chart. So it's really easy. And then finally, what I want to do is I want to change the theme. So if I go back to my grid, I'm not going to do a dark theme because I'm going to show you how to set the dark theme in the CSS, but all the dark and light themes work. We've got 4 themes with 2 variants: Bootstrap, Material, Fluent, and Indigo. And they have a light and a dark variant. So you can see as I click through, you can set any theme. And then, of course, if you want to create your own theme, you can go to town on colors, typography, roundness. And if I go here to custom themes, there's a couple custom themes that we built for different things. But I want to go back to my default themes. And I kind of like this. I think it was the Bootstrap. No, it was the Fluent Light. Yeah, I like the way this looks. It's actually pretty cool. All right, so that's all I'm going to do. Got my Blazor WebAssembly code. Let us download the zip. And this is called Untitled App. I probably should have given it a name, but it is, it is what it is at this point. So let's go to downloads. And I got a bunch of screens here. So I've got my Untitled App. I'm going to unzip this guy and I'll move over my Visual Studio in once it opens up. So let's double click Untitled App.solution. Here's Visual Studio. It's popping up. And keep in mind, all this is done for you. You don't have to do anything fancy to get all of this code. Now, what this is doing at the same time is if I drill into my app and I go to dependencies and I go to packages, it's updating the required packages. So this needs our 22.2.608-dev build. So -dev means it's a pre-release build. But if I go to pages and I go to my chart.razor, you can see that it did my category charts here for me, and it generated all the code that I needed. If I go to my grid view, it generated all of my grid code for me. Now, there's a lot of attributes here on the grid. So I'm just going to hit enter a few times so you can see everything that's going on. So in this case, I've got row selection, cell selection, editable, moving. There's a couple things that we're updating right now with some of the code gen. It'll be fixed by release. And it looks like filter mode here. What this is going to be is called, I think it's the grid. Oh no, filter mode. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Filter mode. And you can see that you get the autocomplete. And I want the filter mode.xl style filter. We have our grid toolbar. So that showed up nicely. And as I scroll down, you can see all of the stuff that was built. So let's go ahead and click run. And this is why everyone needs App Builder. Keep in mind, if you own Infragistics Ultimate, you have App Builder. If you own Ignite UI, you have App Builder. So there's no reason that you shouldn't be using it because it just built all this for me. So I don't have to write all this code. So I've got my grid, I've got my chart view, and you can see my charts. We're going to fix those in a minute. But let's go back to the grid view and let's see what we got here. So I told it that I want to group by. So let's go ahead and group by gender, for example. So now I've got all of my groupings here. I can collapse and expand all the groupings. You got a nice group header. You can select all, deselect all. You can basically do whatever you want. What's even cooler here, if I go to export and go to export to Excel, let's pop this up real quick. And look at that. I've got all my data already grouped. So it is the same groups that you get in the grid. We are really good at export to Excel, and this is built into the grid. So I didn't have to write any code to make any of this work. Also, if I want to hide a column or two, let's say I want to hide my identity columns and maybe, a bunch of different columns, I can do that. I can hide all, I can show all. All of these things are just built in. You don't do any of it. Pinning is another cool thing. And I'm going to show a little bit more with row pinning in a second, but let's go ahead and pin company name, for example, to the left. And now when I scroll like so, you can see that my company name is pinned to the left as it should be. Now let's get rid of that grouping. Once you enable filter mode equals Excel style filter, this is what you get. You get the drop down on the overflow with the pinning, the hiding, the sorting, the moving options. You can see that the columns are moving. You get the filters, and these are based on data type. And I'm going to show you a little bit there too in a second, but you can just deselect all. I can do a couple, hit apply, and those guys show up. But what I want to highlight is a few things. So you'll notice that I do have my summaries on the bottom, and I'm going to go over to a birth date. So birth date is a column that we're going to focus on. And we're also going to focus on, I think there's a column named salary. Oh yeah, they're right next to each other, salary and birth date. So you'll notice here for salary, we've got just numbers showing up. And birth date, we've got the date type coming in from SQL Server. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to make a couple changes. We'll make more than a couple, then I'll run it in respect to time because we've got some other demos that we want to show. So I don't want to show these identity columns. So we have an attribute called hidden. So I can just say hidden equals true for these guys, and they're not going to show. So let me go ahead and copy this. And also I'm using Visual Studio 2022 with Blazor. There's some wonkiness in the IDE. So it's just kind of stuff you have to deal with. But first, let's go to our salary. Now, it comes across as a number, but I know that it's actually a currency. So I'm going to change the data type to a currency, and we'll see how that's reflected in the running app. And then I'm going to change the birth date from a string type. And of course, you guessed it, this is going to be a date. So I just want to show a date, but not only does it display differently, you get different filter options, but you also get different summary options. Now, the other thing I want to do here is I want to show you, I'm going to group some columns here. So let's just group a few columns. And we've got this thing called the IGB column group. And an IGB column group, it allows you to group columns, and then you can make those columns collapse or expand. So let's do Control X, and we're going to group these columns together. Now, the IGB column group has a couple properties. The first one's going to be header. And let's just say this one says employee information, info. And we've got a feature called collapsible, and collapsible is going to equal true. Now, when you think about the types of apps you build, you might have hundreds of columns, especially if you're in financial services. And this is where it comes into play. So once I set this, it doesn't automatically work because we're still working with columns in here. So there is a property called visible when collapsed. So I'm going to say visible when collapsed, and you can see that my IntelliSense is not, it's not keeping up. So I'm going to say visible when collapsed equals false. And I want to copy this. And if you're not the S guy, if you hit Control Alt and you hit the down arrow, it's going to select all the rows, and I can do a multiple Control V and it pastes them all in. Now, when you do collapsible columns, you always have to show at least one column when it's collapsed. And the reason we do this is because you might want to do a template column. Whoops, let me hit escape there. And I want to copy. So what I want to do is I want to show the email column. So I'm just going to leave it there, and I'm going to paste it in. So I'm going to have two email columns here. And for visible when collapsed, of course, it's going to be set to true. So now that's going to be there. Now, so that's the collapsible column groups. The second thing that I want to update here is something called the summary mode. So you'll notice that the summary mode before was like it repeated everywhere. And at the end of the day, you don't need that. So the summary calculation mode has different options. You can do root level, root and children level only. So I'm going to say root level only. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to set row draggable equal to true. So in this case, I'm going to start typing in row, and you can see a bunch of stuff comes up. I'm going to say row draggable, and that's going to equal to true. Now, I'm not going to do anything fancy with that. I just want you to see how easy it is to implement some of these features. So now that I have that, let's go ahead and hit run, and we'll see what the output actually looks like. Now, at the same time, let's say I'm looking over at my slingshot. Oh, I had something go wonky there. Not sure what, but let's go ahead and scroll to the right, and let's go to our groupable column didn't work. I'm not sure why that didn't work, but what I do want to highlight here is our birth date. So you can see here that the birth date column is now displaying as a real date, and I've got the earliest and latest that come across. Also on my salary, you'll notice here that I've got the $ in front of the salary, and I've got the same summaries on the bottom, but they're actually formatted correctly. Now, if I go to username and I go to text filter, you can see that I've got specific type-based filter options. It's going to be the same for birth date now that it's a date filter. So today, yesterday, this month. So you get the ability to have these correct type-based filtering based on the column data type. So it's actually pretty slick.
Jason, line 32, you need to fix line 32.
Oh, okay. I'll check that out. Out. Thank you. And then here, if we go to the draggable, you can see you've got the draggable option here, which is also really slick. You write a little bit of code to like rearrange columns because you may not want this to participate in your sort. So that is something that you would have to just kind of update. And those are those samples that I kind of showed you. You'll be able to see all of that stuff. So Brian said collapsible equals true. Oh, I forgot the equal sign. Thanks, Brian. But since we're here, why don't we make one more change? And then I'm going to go over to the charts. So this is our avatar column. And our avatar column is actually a URL that points to a cloud-based guy. So there's our URL. And we've got some additional properties here: filterable, groupable, et cetera, has summary. I'm going to delete those guys. And what you got with Blazor is the ability to do something called a body template. And the body template is your templated column. Now you'll notice magically IntelliSense and Copilot told me what to put there. It's not quite right, but it's pretty good. I'm going to delete a few things here just to make sure this comes across right. So this is saying in my body template, I want an image. And what do I want that source to be? Well, it's not context.avatar URL. It's context.cell.value. And then style, width, and height is 50. I guess I'll leave that there. I think I was running it without that earlier, and it was, working just fine. And then the last thing I want to do while we're here is we have another really cool feature called an action strip. And the action strip is something that is like in your Gmail, when you're hovering over rows, you get that thing on the right-hand side to delete or edit or whatever. We have the same thing. And we allow you to customize it with your own custom buttons. And we have pinning, editing, and deleting there as well. So let's take a look at our template, at this guy, and then thanks to Brian's debugging, our collapsible column group. We'll hit run again, and then we'll go do the charts real quick. And now I haven't written a line of code yet. App Builder did all the work for me, and now I'm just basically doing a little bit of configuration. So you can see here, I've got my employee info. This could be collapsed on start or expanded on start. It's really up to you, but look at how easy it is and how nice it is that I can see more columns. So, and you can have these all across. You can have multi-column headers, multi-row configurations, etc. If I scroll to the right, we will see our avatar column show up. So there's our avatar. So you know how easy it is to do a column template. And at the same time, I've got my action strip here. And if I start clicking the pin, you'll notice that now I have rows pinned to the top. So not only do we support rows pinned to the top, we support rows pinned to the right, to the left. Well, and we support them to the right as well. But here we go. Look at that. How slick is that? And now if I export this to Excel, we don't support in the export to Excel the pinned rows, but we support the pinned columns. So you'll see here that you get the pinned columns. So the Excel configuration is actually really slick. At the same time, while Brian was debugging, he said, hey, before you do charts, can you show me the dark theme on the grid? And of course, so the way that you set themes is just through CSS. So here, themes grid, it says light. I'm going to say dark, like so, and we'll run that in a sec. But let's go to our chart really quick. And what I'm going to do with the chart is just kind of hit enter a couple times, because there's no property set here. The only thing is actually this. And I am going to copy paste because I know we got to get to the rest of the demos. I am going to just highlight 3 new things. This is basic, right? Titles, right? But these are the new things. The new things is that the chart now has the ability to auto aggregate. In the past, you had to pre-aggregate at your data source and then bind to the chart. Well, now you have a property called initial groups. You have a property called initial summaries. You have a property called group sorts. And there's a few other properties as well based on your configuration. But I can say here, take that huge autos data set with all those fields, and it was really an ugly looking chart. I want to group by country. I want to do an average on the car value. And I want my tooltip to say average car value. And what we're going to do is we're going to parse this. So it says AVG space car space value. And I want to sort on this as well. So I am going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. And I want to change this. I want this to be title. And I'm going to say average salary. by title. And you guessed it, what we're going to do is show the initial group will be title. So group all my data by title as if I was doing a group by. And then I want you to show me the salary as an average. And I'm just going to say this is AVG salary. Now this guy here is what we can actually do the group sort by. So take this guy and paste him here and do it in an ascending order. Now we'll hit run and you'll be blown away, because every time I run this, I'm blown away. So now let's click chart. Oh, look at that. Looks like something dark is coming up. And yes, the dark theme. How beautiful is this? Wow. And chart view. Look at that. How beautiful is that? I've got my chart grouped by country, average by salary, and then look at that tooltip, average car value. And then here, and now keep in mind, I didn't tell this to use a column chart. What the category chart does is it looks at the data, it looks at the amount of data, and it determines all by itself what it should render. And now what's cool is you'll notice that these automatically went sort of at a 45-degree angle. Let me resize my screen. Notice how they resize automatically. You don't have to do any of that yourself, just works. So that's it for my demo. I took way too long. I hope everyone gets the gist of how easy it is to go from App Builder into Visual Studio, customize the Blazor grid, change themes, add a bunch of features, and didn't write any code. I can put this together. We did it in 20 minutes. So George, I'm going to stop sharing. I'll let you show App Builder, and then we will go to Constantine after that.
So just to give you a big overview of what's in Ultimate 22.2, I mean, App Builder is always releasing very frequently, but this is kind of a stage moment, right? We can actually talk about what's actually in the product as a whole. So this release, we have some great feature enhancements for the grid component itself. And some of those benefits actually also translate to other grid-based components like tree grid. So for grid, we are now showing off the column-based enhancements. So what that allows you to do is control what columns you're actually able to see in the component. I'm going to show that to you briefly. Then we have the tree grid component now part of the App Builder toolbox. Then we have components like the accordion. We always had expansion panels, but accordion basically allows you to kind of put real custom components in there, but at the same time control how it expands and collapses. So you can have multiple expand or single expand, and naturally you can put all kinds of content in there. So it could be a heavy text-based content like a FAQ, not a problem for the accordion component. And then we have a lot of quality of life kind of features, which are kind of essential if you want to really share your vision with somebody else. So we have this ability now to share a link to your application so that you can now post it on Twitter or send a link over your chat, and people will be able to see it, even if they're not signed in or have an account with Infragistics. The other quality of life feature I'll show you is that now we actually export licensed packages if you are actually a subscription owner. So if you are subscribed, you do not actually have to do anything else other than do this one-time thing, which again, I'll show you, which allows you to now use licensed packages for your application. And then we kind of brought back the support for Safari and Firefox. I don't know how many of you are on Macs, but I used to be on Safari a lot, but now it's back. And then we actually had include the support for more Google fonts, pretty much all of them. And now when you're creating your theme, so right now I'm using one of those custom fonts from Google, and this kind of expands the universe of font options you had as part of theming. And if time permitting, I'll go into 22.1 to just give you a quick refresher on what was there previously. So what you're seeing here is basically the application preview for App Builder. And this is like an app which I created with all the components, just to give you a feel for how the components are actually behaving. So this is actually the tree component. It basically expands and collapses, and I can actually set it part of navigation so I can use it for routing for my application. But on top of that, the real true secret sauce of App Builder is anything you create in App Builder, and this is actually a compiled version of the same app, it's supposed to look exactly identical, right? So you do not have to actually worry about theming or styling. And this, what you're seeing here, is pretty much what we had actually shown you in application preview, but after generation, it still looks identical. So let's talk about the grid column features. So I'm going to go back into edit here. And with the grid column features, you can see JSON always binding to data, and sometimes his data sources could have a lot of data fields. And what we wanted to do is sometimes when I'm designing, I only want to show off a few columns. I don't want to show all the columns. And now what it allows us to do is you can see here in the outline, it pretty much shows all the columns which are bound to this particular grid. And in this case, I'm bound to a mock data source or a sample data source we have in App Builder called employees. And it has a lot of columns. And sometimes I don't want to show all the columns. So with the grid column-based features, what it allows me to do is I can actually go in here and pretty much nuke it, right? So what that means is I can just come into the outline and hit delete, and my columns are gone. And what that means is that once you have nuked it at the designer level, it won't even show up inside your code gen. And sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. But in this case, it's only actually showing you the columns that you have available. I can go back in here, and the column-based features also gives us other abilities. So now if I want to change the ordering of the columns, it's not a problem. I can do it directly drag and drop on the design surface here. Or of course, I can just move things in the outline, right? So it gives you complete flexibility on what columns to show and in what order these columns should show up. But if you want to still show these columns in code generation, we also have a way for that. So I can just select the grid. I'm going to rebind to get my columns back. I'm going to go to Northwind, employees, and my columns are back. And now what I can also do is I can just multi-select columns. So say that I do not need to see these columns. I can select all of them. And I can come in here and say, just, hide these columns, right? Now the columns are hidden. But the difference is that when I actually look at the code, the columns will still show up, but we have actually taken care of showing that we're setting that property hidden is equal to true for those particular columns, which is what exactly JSON was doing a while back. Now, with these features, what it also allows you to do is in this particular grid, I don't have a lot of features set up, right? So one of the features is hiding. If I actually enable hiding, it's basically you giving your users control over whether this column can be brought back into visibility or not, right? So if I enable this feature, you can see the toolbar actually shows up and you have the 6 columns hidden feature in there. And what that allows users to do is even though the grid initially renders with 6 columns hidden, they can go in there and then enable those columns back. But you can always have more control over it and basically say that, okay, even though I have those columns as hidden, so in this case, you can see hide this column, I can also disable that particular feature. And this is actually useful. Say that you have row editing enabled and you want certain columns not to be editable. So let's just do that here. So say that I can pick this title field here, or let's say last name, and I say, disable editing. For that, I'll go to the grid. I'll enable that editing feature called row editing. And now if I go back into my column, you can see disable editing is available. So when the grid actually, somebody's using that grid, they will not be able to edit that particular row. So it's pretty flexible in that sense. And this is basically setting the stage for more column-based features in the near future. But for now, we also have the support for unbound columns. So you can come in here and insert a brand new column. It's unbound. And you can leave it unbound. You can say my unbound column. And this could be handy for you if you plan to add some custom content via templates after you generate this particular application. But you can create those columns in here. I can set the header text on this particular column. And voila, you can have a blank column in here. It'll generate just fine. And you can also bind it back, right? So for whatever reason, if I remove some columns, I would say that I want to remove this avatar URL. I just say I nuked it. I can come to this unbound column and I can bring it back from my data source again. And that's my avatar. And my header is also updated with avatar URL. So with this column-based features, you get all the beauty of drag and drop. You can control what columns to actually even show in CodeGen, and also whether you want users to be able to enable these columns hidden or pinned, it works the same way. Now with this column features, you can see that when I transition to the tree grid, it comes in very handy, right? So say that in this case, the first column is always showing these expanders in the case of the tree grid. And the tree grid is pretty much identical to the actual grid. The only difference is that we have this additional property called foreign key. And the foreign key is basically saying, okay, what is the unique identifier for the parent, right? So then right now it's a flat data, and it's actually showing you what the unique identifier is. And I've picked manager ID, which happens to be in this data source. But now if I come in here and I grab title and move it to the front, well, guess what? It now shows me the expanders on the first column. So this gives me full control with this column features working in conjunction with tree grid to give me that control over what the data should look like. Let's go back to the preview here. I already showed you the accordion component in runtime. In terms of a design time experience, it's pretty much the same. Any accordion panel I can select, and it basically expands it for me so that I can add the content in there. And from a component perspective, it doesn't have that many properties other than the ability to say, okay, do you want to expand just the single panel, or do you want to expand multiple? So in this case, this particular accordion expansion panel has single. So I'll just go to this one and set it to multiple. And if I preview it, now you can see that all things can be expanded one at a time, whereas this one only shows you one expansion panel at a time. Now I've talked about the basic components, grid columns, tree grid, accordion, and now let's talk about the other quality of life features, so which is like sharing and anonymous preview. And in order to do that, all you need to do is come into your app, which you have designed. And if you're using the App Builder desktop app, this would be extremely useful for you to send a link to us. Say that if you want to troubleshoot something, or you want to send it to your stakeholders, all you have to do is come in here, hit share, and it creates this link for us. And we also have included a tweet link if you are actually tweeting about it, the apps you have created. And it actually creates this nice little, let's just create one. It'll create a nice little card for us so that you could actually show off, the apps you have created. But now if you actually send it to someone, they can actually access it without actually requiring any kind of registration. And we also have the ability, even after you have shared the link, if you change your mind and you want to revoke that particular access, you can always come in and disable this particular link. So anybody who accesses this particular link will actually see a notification that the app owner has prevented you from viewing this particular application, right? Let's go back to my Keep Me Honest screen. Then let's talk about license packages. So the big difference now is in the past, when people were generating apps from App Builder, we were always generating it with a trial package. So you actually had to go in and upgrade it yourself. But now if you are licensed and you're using App Builder, we take care of that. The only thing you need to do extra is for the app. So I'm going to show you Angular here. So this is Visual Studio Code. We have this README file in here. And there is this one command you can run, which is called npm run Infragistics login, which gives you a guided experience on setting up this npm-rc file, which will have all the information required for you to register, to log into the license packages. And from there, that point onwards, you don't actually ever have to do this on this machine again. So it's just a one-time thing. But with this, you'll always get the license packages right out of the box. But if you're a trial user, not a problem. You don't have to do this. You can just go in here, hit npm i, npm run, and then you're good to go. Let's go back to my slides here. And then Safari Firefox support I already talked about. Google Fonts is a minor update. It only matters if you really care about this feature. But basically now, if you go into your themes area and you try to edit this particular theme, and under typography, you see we have all the Google Fonts available. So if you have, say, IBM Plex, well, guess what? It's available for us. And now you can have all the Google fonts, which actually, we have actually pre-filtered the fonts for the ones which have all the font weights. So, but it's still a lot of fonts for you to actually select from. And then just to give you a quick review of what was there in the past, in the previous releases, of course, we had, everything Jason is showing you for category charts. It's also available in App Builder. And then we had actually released GitHub integration. If you guys had not following us very closely with GitHub integration, we made an improvement so that it doesn't roll back changes when you do PRs. And then all the app templates and the layout presets, which allow people who are not familiar with the Flex layouts to quickly create some common layouts inside of App Builder much more easily. And then we have this open API access for both public sources and also for local. And then we had released 4 UI kits for Sketch and XD. But now very soon, I think Constantine might talk about this. We are also going to talk about releasing a Figma support for these particular UI kits. So that's a quick summary of what you would find in App Builder very, very soon. We're going to be updating production with all these features for you to try. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Constantine so that he can dazzle you with his stuff.
Thank you, George.
Awesome. Thanks, George.
Hello, everyone. So since there is not a whole lot of time left for my part of the presentation, but this is Konstantin Dinev. I'm Director of Product Development at Infragistics, and I basically am in charge of all of the controls and components that we ship for the different libraries, together with App Builder and other stuff that we do at Infragistics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on what features we have added to the different products for 22.2. Now, Ignite UI for Angular, Ignite UI for Blazor, Ignite UI for Web Components, Ignite UI for React. All of these products, I need to remind everyone, they're on a continuous delivery basis. They're being pushed basically weekly, and we do features update once every 6 to 8 months. So a lot of the features that I'm going to show have already been released. Now I'm going to start with Angular because this is our most mature product in the current set. In Angular, I'm going to highlight just 2 of the features that we've added recently. Now, a lot of people have asked about grid validation out of the box whenever you edit any of the grids that we ship, and we've delivered that. So now the grid offers out of the box validation service, which will give you UI whenever a column that is edited does not match validation criteria. And this has been implemented on top of an Angular form group. So whatever validation you've done so far in your application, and if you have any custom logic which validates emails, which validates phone numbers, which validates any other type of data, you can reuse it with the grid. Now, what the grid does is once you enter an invalid state, it will show that to the end user. It also exposes a number of events where you can cancel navigation, where you can prevent users from going from one cell to another based on the validation criteria. So if you want data to always come valid whenever editing is submitted, then you can do that. You can force your user to have to give you valid data. So now I'm going to do one more invalid edit in this grid. And what I'm going to show, I don't know why this keeps staying here. All right. What I'm going to show is, I can undo, for example, this. Now the cell turned valid again. I'm going to redo it. It's still invalid because the value in here is invalid. So I'm going to try to commit. And we have hooked to an event which takes the validity of the current grid transactions, sees that there are invalid transactions, and we pop a message. Well, you're about to commit an invalid transaction. So you can cancel this user interaction. Now, this is a very large feature, even though it doesn't seem like it, because it has to do a lot with how Angular does native validation. So the next thing I'm going to show is a new component that we actually just shipped. It's called a query builder, and it's UI. Oh, come on. Okay, now that I managed to hide that. It's UI identical to the advanced filtering UI that we have in the grid, but it's independent. And you can use it to visually construct complex queries on top of entities that you define as a developer. And then you can extract those in the form of JSON and turn them into any other type of transaction, let's call it this way, that you want to push to a server and then use this query. So I can do this. Now, this one is populated with a bunch of entities that we have. So we know that date created is a date. So I'm going to set it to be before today. And then based on this, I'm going to get a constructed query. Now I'm going to move forward from Angular because I don't have a whole lot of time. Actually, one thing that I wanted to mention before I move off with Angular. Pivot Grid now has Excel export. And this is important because this is one of the 4 grids that was actually missing this feature until recently. We released this with 14.2. And so you will see all of the data in the pivot. Of course, the Excel opened on my other screen, so I got to move it forward over here. But all of the data got exported in the format that you currently see it in the pivot as it's displayed. Now I'm going to move over to web components. The first thing that I need to mention. So Jason showed all the goodies in the app builder on how you produce Blazor application. You have seen so far how you produce Angular applications as code generation out of the app builder. But what we're also shipping with 22.2 is web component code generation. So the same applications that you have been working on so far with the app builder, or that you're going to start working on in the app builder, can now be produced with 4 different targets: Blazor server or Blazor WebAssembly, Angular, or web components. Now, it is pretty much the same thing that Jason was showing in terms of an application that I've put together real quickly, but what you get as a code generated from the service is now pure JavaScript and HTML and CSS. We do have components based on lit element. Lit element is Google's wrapper around the create custom element, the native HTML API. So there is no framework dependency here. And as you can see, we are producing the same grid that you were looking at in Blazor, the same grid in terms of features and functionalities and behaviors that we have in Angular. We now have it also in web components. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit later. Now, the web component code generation is important, and not only web components, Blazor, Angular, because the app builder, so far we were calling this a software as a service application, right? But technically, it turned into a platform some time ago. So this is platform as a service now. It's not really only software as a service. Why is it a platform as a service? Because it changes the way that you can start developing web applications. So far, you had to choose a framework before you go in. And based on the framework you choose how and in what way you're going to build an application. With App Builder, you can actually go the other way around. You can build the application visually and then choose the framework and get the appropriate code and appropriate components for it. So that's why we've been working very hard on bringing parity between web components, Angular, Blazor, and soon React. React is going to get exactly the same component parity as all the other 3 frameworks that we've targeted so far. Now, when I talk about web components and how we bring parity, with the recent releases in Ignite UI for web components, we brought in components like select. Okay, that was supposed to work. Sorry. Live demo. Like dialogue and like tree. All right. So let me. This demo works. Okay, nice. So the tree, if you've used Angular or Ignite UI for Angular so far, you've seen this component. We have exactly the same component now in web components, and works the same way. This is a Bootstrap theme. In Angular, you're going to see by default the material theme, but this one also supports a material theme, and you can see the same thing. And in Angular, for example, we have out of the box, integration with load on demand. In web components, we have the same thing. But the most important thing that I wanted to show you today is what we've done with the grids and web components. Okay, and you will see here I have a view of a pivot grid, and it says Ignite UI for web components right here. It doesn't say Ignite UI for Angular. And the pivot grid looks pretty much the same as what we have in Angular, and it is. So let's expand the filtering here. I'm actually going to switch those 2 up. So let's look at the code, because that's important. I may actually be showing you an Angular application, but I'm going to my view 6, where this pivot grid lives. I have a bunch of configuration here, and I have an IGC pivot grid. And this is a pure web component pivot grid, mimicking the exact same features that the Angular grid has. So let's move over to this one, okay? So what is this? It's a hierarchical grid, right? And if I go to my view 5, right here, I have an IGC hierarchical grid. Now, do those 2 match, right? Let's do something. Okay, I'm going to say allow filtering. Voila, I have filtering on this grid, right? And I'm going to say Well, actually, I want the filter mode Excel style filter. Let's save this. And my filtering changed, and I do have Excel style filter on the IGC hierarchical grid. So you see, I'm not showing you a grid where I'm going to tell you, well, we're going to have the feature parity in 2 years. No, we have the feature parity now, and it's a full-fledged web component grid. So I'm going to do one more thing here. So on the row island, let's say, okay, let's allow filtering here. Voila, my child grid also has filtering. So that's pivot, hierarchical. Well, we have a tree grid as well. Jason showed this one in Blazor. We have it in web components. So that's smoke and mirrors. Here it is, IGC tree grid. That's a pure web component tree grid. And as I said, for the other grids, it supports all of the features that the other grids have. By the way, if you noticed, theming is different, right? Because my tree grid uses fluent light. If I go to the hierarchical grid definition, this one uses material light. Let's see what I have here. Oh, I have Bootstrap dark in the flat grid, right? So let's see Bootstrap flat. All right, I do have a Bootstrap theme here, right? It looks different. It's the same grid with a different theme. Flat basic, I think that's material light. Let's check. Yep, it is. And the other one that I have is also material light. But again, the flat grid, it does have all of the features that the Angular grid has. It ships with everything. We're not going to tell you, we're going to add this, in 2 months or in 3 months or in 2 years. We have it all. And it all comes out with 22.2. Now, the only thing that you're probably not going to get 100% with 22.2 is documentation parity. We need to write all of this out. We're very far ahead, but we're not 100% complete. So some of the articles are going to be coming soon, but the features are there and the API is there, so you can get everything to work. And actually, the API is identical to what we have in Angular. And so even if something is missing, you can still go to the Angular docs and see, oh, okay, this is how I do it here, and then convert to web components or to the Blazor. And before we go, I wanted to say something else. So Jason didn't show this, but the tree grid is available in Blazor. And this is actually a generated application from the app builder. So this is the exact same application that I was just showing for web components, but generated for Blazor. And well, no, did I show you this one? I showed you the web component generated one, but I'm going to bring one other application in. This is the Blazor one with the tree grid. And the tree grid is right here. Generate the code out of the app builder. We have an IGB tree grid with IGB columns and all of the settings, right? And if, for example, I remove this, then I'm not going to have filtering with Excel style filter, but I'm going to have filtering that is just basic. Oh, come on, reload. Here it is. And that's pretty much what I had. And I'm 5 minutes over time, actually.
Wow. Amazing. That is just awesome. Thank you, everyone, for those demos. The crowd is cheering. They're going crazy on the chat, on the discussion. Can you see my screen share, Constantine?
Yep, I do.
All right, cool. So it looks like, time to wrap this up. Hopefully you are as blown away as I am. And, I work here. I get to see this all the time. This is such an exciting release. And I think the big thing that was answered throughout the Q&As and the chats is that this is feature parity across the grid. So people ask questions like, oh, can I do this with a column? Yes, you can. Can I customize a summary? Yes, you can. Can I save and load layouts? Yes, you can. If you go to our Angular docs and you said, like, over the last year, man, I wish your Blazor grid would do this thing, It does. That's the whole point. We've been working all year on getting the parity across all of these components. So everything that was in the Angular feature set is now in the web component feature set, and then the Blazor feature set. And then React, as Konstantin mentioned, will be shipping a little bit later this year, but it's all the same. So at that point, it's really up to you. You don't have to choose your framework ahead of time. You might be in a meeting and a developer might say, hey, we want to use React because we need this very specific high performance scenario that the React library gives us because we have a real-time IRC thing going on. And then you might be in another meeting and a guy says, we want to use Blazor. It's an internal app. It's CRM. We got a bunch of C# devs. They know what they're doing with Blazor. Just change the code generation target inside of App Builder and you get it. So there is no restriction on feature set or what you get in the framework. The other thing to highlight is there was a couple of questions like, do you have the query editor like Konstantin had highlighted? It's not shipping in 22.2, but it's going to ship this year. Do you have XYZ control that's over here? If it's not there when we ship, it will be there. So feature parity is the goal. Will we get there this year? I don't know. There might be a couple stragglers going into Q1, but for the most part, we will be at a feature parity level. But for the majority of our customers, you're looking at Angular and you're looking at Blazor. And we have a ton of rich client customers that were using Windows Forms saying, I need all these Windows Forms features, but although in Blazor. Well, that's what 22.2 is all about. You get all those features. You've had them in Angular for a while, a few years, but you really want to continue on with all your C# code and all the other stuff that you're doing. So I want to thank Konstantin, Brian, and George, and Zdravko, and everyone else from the team that was answering questions online. We hope that you are excited about this release as we are to get it into your hands, and then you can give us all the feedback in the world, tell us all the features that you need, and we will respond. So thanks again, everyone, and we will see you at the next webinar. And also, Brian and others pasted multiple times in the Q&A, the Discord channel. Please just go to the Discord channel and ask questions. Ask all these questions. The product team lives on Discord. They will answer your questions for you. So there was a whole ton of like things that maybe we can't just answer in a one-liner in this chat. Go to Discord. You got Brian there. You got George, Konstantin, Zdravko, Pablo, you name it. They're all there, and they are there to help. So thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it. And we will see you at the next webinar.